Welcome to the Spearo Hangout, where we talk all things spearfishing, freediving and foraging. We're three guys from Devon in the UK who are excited to share some of the learnings from our spearfishing journey with you over the coming episodes. We bring in some special guests along the way to help spread some in-depth Spearo knowledge from some of the most experienced people in the scene.
Hey guys, how we doing?
Hey, all right?
Yeah, good, thanks.
Hello.
What you guys been up to this week?
Well, I've had an ear infection, so I had to watch Anthony dive, which is a bit frustrating. Luckily, didn't catch too much.
Yeah, but you learned lots.
I did learn a lot. I'd tell you what, your duck dive was really, really smart. I sent you a video, didn't I, as well? So that was quite nice for you to be able to watch.
Yeah, I was pretty impressed.
Did he catch anything?
Little pollock?
That and an SCI.
So you basically had to hold his hand to take him diving.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, go on, you answer. That's fine.
I took a rod and line actually for the first time in about 3 years, and all it did is remind me why I haven't picked up a rod and line for 3 years. It was so frustrating. You know, it's just completely different, isn't it? You're like a bystander when you're sat on the rocks fishing with a rod and line. You're properly immersed in it if you're spearfishing. So it was generally frustrating. We'd planned to have a catch and cook as well. And of course, Anthony's 30 centimetre pollock didn't really cover that. So I went to McDonald's in the end.
Couldn't catch much.
Never mind. How about you, mate? How was your day? Yeah,
I'm good, thanks, mate. I've picked up some new gear this week, so looking forward to using that in the Nationals. I'll be using the Tarpon guns and the Gladius, Seafoil Gladius.
Yeah, it looked amazing.
So, yeah, man, really looking forward to trying that out. But
someone's spending some money.
Other than that, not a lot else going on. I did see that there was a shark attack recently.
Yeah, I don't know if it was shark attack's probably making it sound like more than it was, right? Was it a bite to the leg or something?
Did you guys see my comment on Yahoo News on Facebook?
No.
Because they were obviously dramatizing the fact that someone got attacked by a shark in UK waters. So yeah. I kind of put my 2 cents in there. Really, it wasn't really a shark attack, was it, as such? But
it was just heard that the shark ate 300 people.
Did you speak to someone at Yahoo News?
Well, he said he worked for Yahoo News, but he was wearing a long trench coat and he was trying to sell me watches.
Yeah, well, it was just one of those like tours that take you out to see the blue sharks, and something very odd happened, I'm sure.
I presume they're chumming up the water to bring in the sharks, and the sharks just don't know what's chum and what's legs, I guess.
Well, that, and she might be in the wrong place at the wrong time. It's just one of those, freak accidents, basically. But
one of the things that I watched the other day was with that gorgeous bloke, what's his name, Chris Hemsworth, and they were doing a documentary about how he was getting into surfing at like the Australian coast, and he was saying that no, it wasn't him. He went and saw a shark expert, and they said that actually, because they were specifically on great whites, I think it was on Disney or something like that, Natural Geographic or something, and they were saying how actually the sharks aren't trying to attack you; they bite you, then realise, oh no, this isn't what I want. So if you gave them enough time, they'd let go. But probably with a great white, they'd probably have your leg off. And
I'm sure there's some exceptions, right?
Yeah, but no, I think it's from the sounds of everything I've seen. I think it was just a wrong place, wrong time, wrong circumstances, and they weren't exactly helping themselves. But I believe the person's okay, and they've said that it was a mistake.
Yeah, and they put out a really nice statement, actually, didn't they? Saying, it's not the sharks' fault. We were there in their kind of territory, their world.
Yeah, it happens.
I did see a really interesting video going around of a tuna in Plymouth Bay, though. Did you guys see that?
Yeah, that was pretty cool. It was albacore, is that right?
It was albacore tuna, yeah.
Which are legal to catch, I believe.
So I understand.
That'd be a good catch.
I would have no idea.
Thing illegal to catch tuna-wise, you're not allowed to catch bluefin, I believe. So somebody will correct me, and there'll be some expert that will come along and say that I'm wrong. But bluefin's the only thing you can't catch. Otherwise, you can catch everything else, I believe.
Cool.
So you guys ready for the ex-nationals on Saturday?
Yeah, coming up. But my ears are fixed. I'm ready. You guys ready?
Yeah, I can't wait to try the new gear. I don't know if it's a bad idea taking the new gear to national, but I can't miss any more fish, can I? So,
I'm just going to go there underestimating my ability to catch, and then, what is it they say in sales? Under promise, over deliver.
That doesn't sound like your style, Anthony, to be honest.
Yeah, he's bigging himself up again. We'll see what happens on Saturday.
I've got to bring some points for the team, haven't I?
Yeah, absolutely. Good stuff. Well, yeah. I can't wait. Really looking forward to it. So who we got today, Richard?
So, yeah, we got the Oyster Lady, Katie Davidson.
Cool.
She's going to come on and talk to us about all things seafood, cooking, oysters, lobster. I mean, the depth that this woman goes to is quite outstanding, actually. I was looking on her Instagram earlier, and yeah, it's quite interesting what she's involved in. So I'm looking forward to this one.
Awesome. Let's get into it.
Hi, Katie. How you doing? You all right?
Hi there. Yeah, I'm great. Thank you. How are you doing?
Katie.
Yeah,
hello,
I'm
everyone.
Good, thanks.
Hi, Katie.
Hi.
Thanks for coming on the podcast. We really appreciate that.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
So, as I just said in the intro, like you're involved in a lot of things. First of all, how do you find the time to spearfish?
Because quite luckily I'm self-employed, and I can kind of justify anything to do with the ocean as work-related.
Yes, okay. If you can just give us a bit of an explanation about who you are and what it is you do, really, if you don't mind.
Yeah, it's a difficult one to answer sometimes because it sort of changes quite often. But at my core, I'm all about food and the natural ways of getting hold of that. I've been teaching oyster classes for, I think, since 2007. And it's because they're like one of the most kind of nutrition-packed and kind of exciting foodstuffs in my mind on the planet. They're just like ready to go. It's like nature's fast food, but a lot better for you. So I kind of got enamored with them from when I was about 12 years old and on a family holiday in France. And my dad had 6 of them from a market, and he proceeded to try and open them with a hinged penknife, which did not turn out well for Dad. I mean, eventually not for the oysters either, but imagine like 12-year-old girl sitting there watching her dad trying to open these oysters with a penknife, and sort of there was blood. So they kind of caught my imagination, and that was it really. Any opportunity I was involved with oysters. And I've been teaching and hosting oyster classes ever since. That was like the core of my business.
Because you started the London Oyster Week as well, didn't you?
Well, I started it and I finished it all in 2018. I've only done one.
Right. Okay.
Well, basically, it was going to be biannual, but obviously 2020 was a bit of a curveball.
Yeah.
But London Oyster Week worked out really well. I did it pretty much solo. Got 25 venues on board in London, and it was all about just getting more people to eat them because they're such a sustainable food stuff, and again, really interesting. We do barbecued oysters, oyster mixology, and obviously things like shucking competitions to get people intrigued. They're great with things like tequila. If you squeeze a bit of lime and a tiny bit of tequila in one, it's gorgeous. So there's huge amounts of variety.
Yeah, I mean, all us 3 guys, I'd say we're all pretty handy in the kitchen. So I think we're looking forward to picking your brains when it comes to some recipes and stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm sure we're going to get into that in a bit. But yeah, I just want to give people a bit more of a background around like the classes and stuff that you do. So you do, like, is it seafood hosting events as well?
Yeah, again, like I said, it sort of varies depending on what people want. But I regularly hold masterclasses in oysters, crab, and lobster. And I do shucking at weddings with my oysters, do catering, small events, launches. Yeah, oyster parties. Anything where there's seafood, I'm there. Ceviche.
And you do a bit of journalism as well, is that right?
I do. Yeah, I do. I write about kind of like anything, again, to do with nature, travel, adventure, sustainability, and food. And of course, fishing is a huge part of that as well. Yeah.
And is that
one of my main focuses.
Is that how you got into spearfishing then? Was it like as part of a sustainability or?
Yeah. So basically, I have fished most of my life. My dad was a fisherman out of Newlyn, and I only ever line fished. And I've always worked in sustainability as well, with like food charities and all sorts of stuff. And again, that's why oysters really caught my attention. But in 2013, I went to the Caribbean to live, and got basically, when I was fishing here with lines, I was just getting like small mackerel and pollock and things like that. Apart from once we caught a poor beagle out of Newquay, that was quite cool, but we had to release that obviously. Because they're related, speaking of sharks, they're related to the great white, and they look like a miniature one. It's like a bonsai great white.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I was in the Caribbean and I got into tournaments and fishing tournaments and stuff. So really got into it. But I'd never spearfished because I didn't think I could equalize. So I kind of had to have my fun with the fishing above water. But I was having a conversation about it with someone who's on the freedive course here in Newquay. It's just around the corner from my house. And they kind of really raised up the sustainability aspect of it. And it hadn't ever quite occurred to me for some reason. I suppose because I just put it to one side because I thought I couldn't do it. And it was just like, oh yeah, of course, target one species, target a species, target one fish, no bycatch. And that really made me even more interested. And that's how I ended up writing an article about it for Coast Magazine, and went on a little course with Spearfishing UK to do that.
Wow.
So that was my first ever foray.
Nice.
Brilliant.
And so, Katie, going back to the Oyster Lady, where, with the sustainability in mind, where do you source? Obviously, as it's you and your own business, you're self-employed. Where do you source all of your produce?
Well, with the oysters, we're really lucky because in Cornwall we've got one of the best oyster farms in the country. I might be a little bit biased, but it's on the Camel Estuary. So you've got this beautiful, big, wide, sandy estuary, which means the oysters are very clean. It's not like a silty estuary. It's really sort of pristine water. And they grow really well there. The guys have been farming there at Porthilly for decades now, and they've won blind taste tests. So I can literally drive up there and just grab my own supply and use them for whatever I'm doing. And that's where I actually do some of my classes on the beach at the oyster farm. Set up a little table and a barbecue, teach people to shuck, and we do tastings and barbecue some oysters and have a lovely time.
That sounds awesome.
Nice.
Tell us a little bit more about the oysters themselves, Katie. As I understand, there's 3 different species in the UK. There's the native, Pacific, and a Japanese one.
So that's a little bit of a kind of there's 2 species basically.
Okay. Yeah.
The native oyster that you're talking about is from, is famous from the Fal Estuary, the ones, the little round brown flat ones, Austria edulis. And those have been farmed in this county for like hundreds of years. Fished.
Yep.
And they're still fished in exactly the same way as they were hundreds of years ago because it's been protected by legislation. So they're only allowed to fish them by manual or sail power. And I have to confess to you that is, I went and worked with them one day, and I've worked on a lobster boat, and I've worked on a line fishing boat in the Caribbean, like hand line catching fish commercially. That was the hardest work I've ever done.
I can imagine. How do they farm them? I mean, obviously you can manually pull them off rocks, but how do you do it with sail power?
So the natives don't grow on rocks. They're the ones that are more sort of the
in the mud. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. The south coast of Cornwall's got the more sort of muddy estuaries. They tend to sort of sit at the bottom there, and they use little dredges. So they will go out on the sailboats. They'll drop a dredge, hand dredge. It's not very big.
Yeah.
And drop that dredge, let the boat drift, and then obviously drag it along from the distance that they've drifted, shake it out onto a little wooden board, throw away all the detritus, which there's a huge amount of. Yeah. Sometimes you won't even get one oyster. So it's quite.
It's quite a sustainable approach. I mean, people think of dredging as a really negative thing.
I know, yeah. No, it's very low impact, and they have a special little metal circle that is given to them by as a license holder. And if the oyster fits through, it goes straight back in the sea. So they're protected in that way as well. It's really amazing.
Awesome. I caught one out on a little trip out to Cornwall. What was that, Rich? About 3 weeks ago. I've got one here.
Oh, you've got one with you.
Yeah. Well, I thought I'd bring a prop for the first time, the first prop on Spare Hangout. So, just to describe it to the listeners, it's kind of like a semicircle, and it's got almost like a jiggity-jaggedy, serrated kind of edge around the outside. I believe this is Pacific oyster.
Yeah.
Is that,
Yeah. So that's the one you would have thought of as Japanese. That's where they came from originally.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. How would you recommend eating this oyster? Maybe it's the same for all oysters.
Yeah. To me, if you're going, I mean, I'm going to get geeky about it now. But if you ever try an oyster from a new appellation, because again, it's very similar to wine, the culture around it. If you get an oyster from a certain area, it takes on the characteristics of that area in terms of nutrition and the kind of character of the water. And you have terroir with wine from the earth. We have merroir from the ocean for the oysters and where they grow. So my recommendation is to always try your first oyster from a new appellation naked, as we say. Mm-hmm. And that means nothing on it, absolutely nothing, raw. Sip it. We obviously have to shuck it properly and make sure it's detached.
Yeah.
And then you sip the liquor first, and that gets your palate going. People rush them too much. These things take 2 to 3 years to get to marketable size, so you've got to take your time.
Yeah.
So you have a sip of the liquor, gets your palate going, and then it also reduces the volume if it's quite a sizable oyster, which is handy. And then you tip it in and just give it a little chew, and you really notice this amazing flavour profile then.
So this might be offensive, but I boiled mine. Like a mussel.
Oh, how did that turn out?
Well, so I caught an edible crab the same day, and I thought what might be nice is if it had a bit of that crab flavour, get the water from the crab, and it was absolutely delicious. It was one of the nicest bits of seafood I've ever had. I felt bad.
The oyster was.
Yeah. I felt bad just boiling it because I know that's not the normal way to eat oysters. But it was absolutely delicious, and it just made me want to try more. This is probably the first one I've had since a trip to France with the school. When we were in year 8, sipping it raw.
I think that was that was due to me though, wasn't it? Because you asked me what you should do with it, and I did tell you to cook it because, as far as I know, in the UK during the summer months you shouldn't really eat wild oysters raw. Is that right? Or
yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, you can risk it if you feel kind of quite stoic, but when you have farmed oysters, to be legal to sell, they have to be decorated for 48 hours to clean them.
And they just sit in seawater, do they, for that to work?
Well, it's really cool what they do because, I mentioned the merroir. With a good quality oyster, you don't want to strip it of its natural flavour.
Of course.
So what they do is they pump the seawater into tanks through ultraviolet light treatment. And so it then goes through and the oyster will feed on that for 48 hours and be moved along different tanks, different stages of the 48 hours. And it's purified and it retains its original merroir.
Fascinating. So, what should I have done if I don't have a UV light and lots of tanks to shift my one oyster through?
Well, it's either risk it or cook it.
So if I was going to cook it, boiling's frowned upon. What is a nice way to cook it? Barbecue?
In my opinion, just like baking it in its shell. It comes like ready prepared in its own little saucepan and its own baking dish. So they're incredible. And what's lovely is if you pop a bit of butter on, a bit of garlic and a bit of rosemary, that's one of my favourite recipes.
So shuck it first, butter, garlic, rosemary, under the grill.
And then just either on the barbecue, in the oven. And like in your oven, you've got like the shells. They sit perfectly like cupped in the gaps between the little in the tray, because you want to maintain the liquor, you want to keep it level.
And on that point, would you do the same as you would for, say, cockles or mussels, in that you'd leave it in a bucket for, say, 4 or 5 hours to sort of purge, or are oysters different?
No. I think for some reason that's more to do with getting the grit and the sand out, isn't it? Because they're smaller.
Mm-hmm.
I think, no, the oysters, you couldn't do that. If you left it long enough, you'd end up with some pearls. because they don't really have those irritants in them, and if they do, they start making a pearl out of it.
So, Katie, to all this talking about oysters, I've been sat here with a lot of saliva in my mouth, and not necessarily for a good thing. I had a bad experience with them probably about 9 years ago. Went to I can't even remember what it was. It was some do for my grandfather, but anyway, he loves oysters. He loves Chianti. So I went to Tesco's, bought 24 oysters and a bottle of Chianti, of which I only had one glass because the preceding statement is going to it will make sense in a sec. But so I had 9 oysters while sort of having a sip on a glass of Chianti. I was enjoying them as much as I personally believe you can enjoy oysters. It's a very acquired taste.
You're very diplomatic.
Yeah, trying. And so anyway, so I'd had those 9 oysters, and this was in the time when I was living in just outside of London, but in Reading. And so straight after we'd had the 9 oysters, I'd said goodbye to my grandfather, started driving all the way home, got to Bristol. An hour or so later, just got past Bristol and was like dicky tummy, starting to get the thicker saliva at the back of my mouth in the outside lane, doing 70, inverted commas, definitely not. And immediately was like, shit, I need to, no, that's it. I managed to, doing 70, grab a plastic bag from the passenger side footwell, immediately started projectile vomiting as pulling over to this hard shoulder, and then was vomiting for 10-15 minutes and then felt perfectly fine after. I take it that's because I love lobster, I love crab. I probably just had, out of those 9, a bad oyster from Tesco's.
Yeah, I could imagine that's possible. I mean, the kind of journey it's taken to get to Tesco's is going to be very different from me picking one up from Tim's lovely farm. Do you see what I mean? Not to sort of insult Tesco people. You haven't tried one since?
No, as I say, even talking about them now, if I see somebody shuck them and I see an oyster, I immediately my throat sort of closes up, and it's like, no, run away.
Yeah. See, I mean, yeah, it happens. It does happen, but I mean, it happens with other food stuff as well. It's just oysters have, got that reputation solidly as being, and it's like kind of repeated time and time again in films and all sorts, isn't it? Like Mr. Bean does it. And I've also been sick with oysters, and it was during a live oyster demo on the South Bank, which was a little bit. And I remember, I had also had quite a lot of vodka the night before, so let's not entirely blame the oysters. But I remember that I was holding on to my hands, sort of digging my nails in, finishing the presentation, because it was about oysters as well.
Oh, no.
And then I remember just everyone came up to talk to me at the end, and my sister was there at the time, and I just grabbed her and said, "Speak to them," ran off. And I obviously did similar to what you did. And I was so terrified that I would be, because they say once you've been sick with oysters, you can't go back. You sort of create an allergy. I was so scared that was a possibility that I ran straight to the oyster stand and ate 6 more. Kind of in my mind, I know that sounds crazy, but it was like hair of the dog that bit you, or some weird idea of homeopathy, something. I was just determined not to let that happen. So
I think we're gonna have to change your name from the Oyster Lady to the Lady with the Iron Stomach. That's but sort of leading on from that, how as the Oyster Lady, how do you, other than buying obviously from a good source, when you shuck them, is other than, I'd say, smell maybe, but is there anything you can do to say or see that you might be pushing that risk factor a little bit too much when you shuck an oyster?
No, unfortunately not. The short answer to that is because anything that's really going to hurt you is completely invisible to the naked eye. The stuff sometimes there's norovirus outbreaks, and you won't see that. The oyster will look and smell and even taste perfectly fine. So your best bet, if you want to completely avoid that, is obviously to buy them from someone who's purified them from a farm.
But would cooking remove sort of that risk factor?
Yes.
That'll remove it. Okay, cool.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I always recommend because it is really good fun to forage your own. And especially now there's so many of the rock oysters down on the south coast here. I've done it myself, been out on the sea kayak with a hammer and chisel, and you're like hacking them off the rocks, and it's really satisfying.
Yeah.
And I did eat some of those raw, but I did take my lime and tequila, which the story about why there's always a lime in a Corona bottle. Is it Corona? But the beer bottle is always like of Sol, whatever. They have the slice of lime in, and that's because they were all kept in crates outside the pubs, and it was a way of kind of cleaning the rim of the bottle,
killing the bacteria.
Yeah, so I use the same logic. Tequila and lime.
No, I'm just thinking about trying to get back because I love all seafood, and I'm just trying to get back into oysters. And obviously, we'll meet in person hopefully sometime soon. And the one thing I don't want to do is not try some of your oysters.
Vomit on me.
Yeah, and vomit on you.
I tell you what, there are sort of stealth oyster dishes because I can imagine psychologically there's probably a bit of a barrier there. So there's ways of hiding them.
Yeah, definitely. But just going back to Richard's point earlier, the month beginning with R, is that fairly accurate as a good rule of thumb? Avoid them eating them raw in a month that doesn't have an R in. Is that right?
To be honest, that's not really to do with how safe they are and when they're, whether or not they're going to be giving you an upset stomach. It's more to do with it's their breeding season.
Yeah,
which is why even now the natives, you don't get them in summer because that's their breeding season. So they need to have that fishery protected, and they're only for sale in the sort of. That's another reason why I feel a bit sorry for those fishermen because not only is it the hardest physical work, but their season starts like September, October through the winter. Yeah. But no, and you can eat rock oysters all year round because they're farmed like all year round and they're fine. I have a feeling it was also probably to do with the fact that oysters were once the foodstuff of the poor and they were shipped into London by the million in barrels and just dished out as a really vital source of protein. Wow. And there wasn't any refrigeration. So they, it was like, it was probably, I sort of got a bit, I went off, digress there, but I think that was why, the reason why people knocked them back in one as well. Is because they were just so prolific. But yeah, native oysters only in the winter.
Are we saying that they taste very similar, the Pacific and the rock oyster, or the Pacific are the rock oysters?
Yeah, this always gets people confused. The Pacifics and the rocks are the same thing. They're Cassostrea digas, to be geeky about it.
Cool.
They're the ones that came over from Japanese waters originally, and they're the most prolific farmed oyster. The really classic teardrop shape, greyish oyster. The native, which is actually indigenous to our country and was once prized by the Romans and Phoenicians who would sail over to pilfer them, is brown, round and flat. It's the Ostrea edulis, and they taste completely different.
Do they? Okay.
Just summed it up greatly in that, in my mind, the rock oyster is a rock oyster because it's normally attached to rocks. And then the native oyster is the big flat round one that I put similar to a scallop, but an oyster scallop.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I see the theory. Yeah, I understand that one. Although saying that one, that oyster, where did you get that one from, Ben?
This was St Austell Bay.
Was it really?
Yeah,
you can tell
on a rock.
Wild. Yeah, was it? Which side was on the rock?
So I don't know if you can see on the camera here, but it was attached to a little bit of shale there.
Yeah, and you can usually tell a wild one. I mean, obviously you know it was wild because you harvested it. But the ones that are farmed are shaped during the farming process. They're kind of shaped to be this sort of ideal cup shape,
Oh wow!
A nice teardrop shape. Yeah.
How do you shape an oyster?
So because they have them in bags on the rack and posh system. That's the traditional French one. So it's a metal frame in bags with different size gauge holes in that. And the farmers will go out and shake them to get the loose kind of thin growth off of them. And it's sort of the amount of oysters per bag determines how they will grow. All sorts of little tricks. They'll grow together, as you can imagine.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I've watched some of the videos on YouTube of the oyster farmers out in the US and how their oyster farms they can only get to sometimes on spring tides, and they've only got like 2 hours to get out there, get the oysters out the bags, and then get them back in before their tractor's submerged in the sea.
Yeah. There's so many different like environments for them at the moment, like these days, because people are pushing the boundaries of where they can do aquaculture because it is so sustainable. And we've developed, well, not we, but people are now using the floating cages, so you can have them further out in the ocean and they're constantly in the sea. Whereas naturally, as you can see from the one that you find on the rocks, they spend a lot of the time out of the water. So the tide goes out and leaves them exposed in like really hot sunshine sometimes, which is one of my other points I make when people sort of get freaked out about how, they think that they're going to sort of die off really easily and be damaged by warmth. But they're hardy. A lot hardier than people think. I kept oysters in the fridge for 17 days before and I met them.
Like, obviously, we're just going back a little bit quickly because I think it might be quite valuable. The whole like picking them during the summer months, I thought that was to do with algae blooms as well, because obviously like things like mussels and oysters and stuff, obviously they filter the water, don't they? So when you get an algae bloom, is it correct that potentially can be quite a hazard to health when you eat something that's been in an algae bloom?
Yeah. Obviously that's very specific, like a specific incident, isn't it? So it doesn't mean the whole summer is out of bounds, but obviously
of course,
you use your discernment. If there is an algal bloom, it would be the same for most shellfish.
Yeah. And are you a purist, or what's your favorite way of eating them if you're going to make them for yourself?
Well, I used to be really purist about it, but when you have access to them all the time, you get really inventive. And, like I mentioned earlier, the one with the garlic and rosemary and butter. Butter makes everything better. That's just a lovely way of doing it, because I call it the roast dinner in a half shell, because the oyster is very rich and salty. And for me, I was trying to imagine what kind of flavor profiles that reminded me of, and it was lamb. So that's why I put the garlic and rosemary with it.
Nice.
But the tequila one, is like, as soon as I start saying which ones I like, I end up with this really long list.
Yeah.
And that one. I mean, one of the most, when you ask me if I'm a purist, if we're going to swing all the way to the opposite side of that spectrum, it would be the aphrodisia, which was one of my inventions. When you just you've got ingredients around you, and you're like, I'll give that one a go. And it's dark chocolate, sugar, butter, and rum. Baked on the barbecue. It melts, and it's like people have freaked out a little bit by that one. It's
an oyster creme brulee.
Well, similar, yeah. It's if you imagine like salted caramel chocolates.
I think it sounds delicious, actually.
I think
I'll try
that's going to
it.
have to be my introduction back into oysters, I think.
That might not be the place to start, though.
Well, it might be, because it might cover up some of the taste that he might be.
No, it wasn't the taste. I think it was. I just think it was too much at once of probably a not decent product. And again, not poo-pooing anything you can get from any of the major superstores, but it just happened to be that day I just didn't agree. And then, like you say, it's once you got that mindset, it's getting past that.
Yeah, funny you should mention that about the supermarkets, because I did find it quite strange. If you look closely at the label, the price tag on the wet counter at supermarkets for oysters, it tells you do not eat raw. I think that's how worried they are about their sort of supply chain.
Just a couple of bucks.
The fact that it's got rum in it, I'm all for it.
Hey, there's a little glimmer of hope there for getting back on the oyster wagon.
What about all the shells then? What do you do with all the shells that you get left over?
This is a bit of a point for kind of improvement, I would say. Not because of anything I do or don't do, but because there's legislation involved, and it's illegal for us to put the oyster shells back in the sea after using them, after after eating an oyster.
Yeah,
is that right? Why is that?
Yeah, because they say it's been through the human food chain. Basically, honestly.
I didn't realise you needed to eat the shell as well as the oyster.
Yeah, that would give you an upset stomach.
That's crazy. What if you eat it on the beach and leave it on the beach? That's littering.
Sure
it's very bizarre.
isn't it? But it's just a legislation thing. It's like human food waste. So
Is that the
problem
same
with
for
that-
all shellfish, like lobsters,
I imagine.
crabs?
Yeah, I imagine so.
The reason I was asking was because I thought perhaps I have seen it done before where people crush the shells and then use it in
Yeah.
gardening.
Yeah.
So I thought maybe that might be something that you would do, or I don't know. I don't know what we haven't really got to that. What do you do with them? Do you?
Well, I give them to people. I encourage my guests to take them away. And I'm like, you can use this for, salt and pepper pinch pots or holding your rings or chicken feed or, if you crush them up. And I use them in the bottom of my plant pots because it helps with drainage.
Mm-hmm.
But I have so many, I can't use them all. So, and the reason why it is a shame is because oyster shells, if they're back in the ocean, provide a habitat for the baby oysters to grow on, the oyster's fat to settle and grow on. And obviously it would build reefs as well. So it's just a bit of a silly situation. But there are charities out there that are collecting shells, and you have to either leave them for a year or something ridiculous in the sun to kind of naturally deproteinize. That's not a real word. Or they have to be cleaned in a certain way, and then they're allowed to go into the sea again.
Wow. Never knew that.
Yeah, that's incredible. So moving on to Anthony's favourite part, lobsters.
Lobsters.
Oh, yeah.
Anthony's known to eat every single bit of a lobster. More so than the usual person. But
no, I just eat the best bits.
I've got a funny feeling that you and Anthony are very alike in that respect.
Yeah. I mean, the first time I ever ate a lobster was a long time ago. It was actually in Whitstable, I think. And my boyfriend at the time was very fussy, and he just ate the tail. And I was like sitting at the table for an hour longer than him with the same amount of food served up because I was going through every single tiny little bit, Just he was sat opposite me like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm eating lobster. But I understand that. And I did actually hear you talking about it the other day when I was listening.
I'll hand over to you, Anthony.
Where do I start apart from saying tamale? I mean, for me, I mean, lobster tail has got that really nice sweet flavour. So it's on par with crab. It's a different flavour to crab. It's got that subtle sweetness, and then you get into the tamale, the same as with crab head meat or the brown meat, as a lot of people would know. It's like intensified flavour, and anybody, like whenever I go into families' houses when I was growing up, and you'd see people that just throw their head away and not even like get into the knuckles of the joints or anything. But one of the best things I saw was how Gordon Ramsay, a while ago on a competition, one of those cooking competitions, got rid of or got out absolutely every single piece of meat from this shell. And I was just drooling. It's just the best thing.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. And that brown meat, because as we've mentioned, I do the lobster and crab masterclasses, and a lot of people just don't realise what's there. And I don't know if you know this, but have you ever had foie gras?
Yes. Yeah. One of my favourite things.
Right. I can imagine it is from what you've said about, because what I always say to people, because even I think the French have actually banned foie gras, which is crazy because it's where it came from. But I did like it, but then I realised what I was doing. Do you know what I mean? It's one of those things that sort of got under my radar, and then I was like, oh, hang on. Yeah. What I think, actually, I always say to my guests is that brown meat in the lobster is so smooth and buttery. It's like an ethical sort of option of foie gras. It tastes like that to me.
While we're on the subject of the brown meat, a lot of newbies always ask us questions. So I'm going to ask you, because you're the expert here. What is a brown meat? Because a lot of people think it's like excrement and everything else, but honestly, that's like 99% of what people think it is. I know,
I've seen it myself. Like people kind of freak out, and it's basically they're like innards. There's different elements, because you've obviously got the roe, which is the bit that's like beautiful bottle green. If you look closely at it and give it a little sort of squeeze, it looks black, but when you cook it, it goes bright red. You know the stuff I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Is that what you'd call like the line that runs along the top of the tail? I always thought that was like the intestines Or
No,
is?
there's that one little thing that we call in the class, I've not thought of a better name for it. I call it the poo vein, which is what it is.
Yeah, you chuck that bit, right? Or not?
When it's raw, but personally, I've forgotten about it when it's cooked.
Oh, interesting. I mean, you eat it with prawns, I guess. Unless
exactly.
the big ones. Yeah.
The whole thing. But yeah, so you're talking like their liver and things up there, all their innards.
So when newbies look at like the brown meat, it is perfectly edible. It's 100% safe and it's absolutely delicious.
Yeah, 100%. It's one of the best parts. It's a treat, isn't it?
Which bits?
I mean, the other thing that you've got to remember is that you look at somewhere like Japan, and as a Western culture, we look at a lot of what Japan eats or what other indigenous tribes eat, and you're sort of like, oh my God, how do they eat it? They must have the stomach for it. They've been doing it for thousands of years, and they are it is the most sustainable way of eating an entire animal, because you're not throwing away all that protein, that goodness, and for me, that flavour.
Yeah. Flavour and all the different nutrients as well. It's some of the most nutrient dense parts of it. And there is some kind of symbiosis in eating that you need all of those parts that are good for you, to balance them out nutritionally. But this is what makes me laugh as well is, we've talked about lobster and I get that because it's gorgeous. But you know what dead man's fingers are in a crab?
The lungs or gills, aren't they?
Oh yeah, gills. But yeah, so everyone says dead man's fingers, even the name, it's like, oh, they're poisonous. They're not. And you can eat them. They're papery. They can be a bit papery, but everyone thinks they're poisonous. There's nothing poisonous in a crab.
I thought that was where a lot of the heavy metals collected in there. But maybe I just read some random Daily Mail page at some point and got the wrong end of the stick.
If it's going to collect, it's going to collect anywhere, isn't it? Like, it's going to sit in the muscle. It's going to sit in every part of the animal. So it's not going to be particularly there.
So it's more around the texture that people don't like rather than the flavour or any kind of issue.
It's the texture. And also if you think it is part of their filtration system, but, as Spiros and people who are in the ocean a lot, we're pretty much swallowing that stuff every day anyway.
That's true.
And what I was going to say is that I love, obviously, you've seen some of the stuff that I've experimented with the roe. But those I was like, God, everyone's talking about these being poisonous and horrible. I've got to find something to do with them. And so I have quite a lot from all my classes, and I just pulled them all out and sort of pressed them in kitchen towel, dry them out. And I dropped them in the deep fat fryer, and they sort of literally turned into crab popcorn. They sort of crisped up. And then you just sort of obviously drain off the oil, and then they're crispy and they're delicious. So there you go. There's a really good option.
That was one of the things I was going to say that I do with them. And another thing that people throw out that you shouldn't. Shallow pan fry them. Yeah. And it kind of just adds a little bit more, because I normally deep fry them in clarified butter. So it adds a little bit more of a good flavour to them.
Yeah.
But another thing that is a kind of a segue, or not segue, but a side note is people throw away fish scales. Don't do exactly the same, and it's like fish pork scratchings. And they're tiny little things, but you'll see a lot of these like 3-star Michelin restaurants will do it. They'll use everything, and then they'll top their foods with these deep fried fish scales. It's gorgeous.
Yes, agreed. Because they've got a lot of that I'm trying to think of the word. Well, it's quite cartilaginous. That is a real word this time. And I think actually that, we talked about because we all know that wrasse gets a bad rap. And everyone says, let's do ceviche, which I'm all for because I love ceviche, like you wouldn't believe. But the point was raised because of what you said about the scales, because, it's also quite a hassle scaling fish. The soup recipe inherited and sort of adapted slightly from what I learned in Belize. You can just put the whole lot in, and again, the scales lend themselves to a soup because of that cartilage.
Do they break down?
Pardon?
Do they break down in the soup?
They do a bit, yeah. So basically, you just literally chop the fish up, put the whole thing in chunks, and I put it into coconut milk rather than water, and you just slowly simmer that, the whole thing. Obviously, you gut it, but the rest of it just all goes in. And that's how they do it in the Caribbean, the Garifuna culture, the hudut soup.
So just to make sure we're clear about this, whether it's a crab, a lobster, fish, shellfish, you'd eat absolutely everything apart from the stuff that, like the shell, that's obviously inedible. Absolutely everything.
Yeah. We have this really fun moment in the class with the crab where we've taken that central section out, where all the leg joints are. And I show them where the crab's heart is. And it looks like a white Milky Way star. I don't know why I'm putting up my head there, but
What about gutting the fish then? Do you not gut the fish? Do you gut your fish?
For the soup, 100%. Yeah.
I think I was just going to say, I think fish guts they're different to crustacean, and I think that's mainly because their anatomy is very similar to us. In that, I mean, you look at Japan. Japan will eat a lot of the fish guts as well. Like the fish liver is a massive thing in Japan. You'll even get some of the guys out there that'll eat whatever the fish has in its stomach, whatever that fish is eaten. They'll then cook that up into sort of a miso soup or a side dip mayonnaise, and they absolutely adore it. So they've got to be something to it.
Well, I mean, cod liver oil was a supplement that we all got dished out as kids because it's so good for you. And I've done similar when I've been out on a boat or wherever spearfishing, and you start gutting. If a nice liver comes out, I can't help. I actually have a little taste raw right there and then.
Very brave.
Nice.
Anthony's very impressed.
I'm just, my stomach at the moment is going, fuck.
What, is it hungry or is it freaked out?
Both, mainly because of the fact that it's had the half an hour talking about oysters where it's been going no, nothing's coming in, and now we're talking about lobsters. It's like a completely different saliva.
So
emotional roller coaster for your tummy.
I promised the listeners on a couple of episodes ago, I think it was anyway, that we're going to give them a RAS recipe for that soup. Are you willing to share it? Or?
I mean, there is a video of it. I did a video. I got the original video from Belize where we made hudut from scratch, which included like literally husking coconuts and cracking them open and then grinding out the meat, and it was incredible. And then the plantains we used, we had to beat with a massive wooden bowl and a stick, like a person height stick. So I didn't do that here. But my recipe was inspired by that. It's very simple. It was just literally, like I said, get a load of coconut milk, but the thick stuff, not like coconut water that you get for drinks for your electrolytes, but the tins of coconut milk. And I just sort of saute up onions, garlic, and chop up the fish, chuck it in with sort of, you get your sort of powdered garlic and all the sort of the spices. You can sort of dust them, completely coat them in those spices, and then saute them along with the onions. And then you just chuck it all in the big saucepan full of coconut milk. I always keep some onions aside because it's nice to put those in afterwards. Because what you do I love it as well because I don't know if you've noticed this, but I think that wrasse are quite freaky looking because they literally have got like those teeth that, by talking of looking at stomach contents, I caught one the other day and I was gutting it at sea. And felt like a sea otter. I had like it caught between my knees and I was pulling its guts out. And I was like, wow, this thing's got like whole muscle shells in its stomach and lymph pits. It's like got a very strong, like tough stomach lining. And it's because those teeth are pretty like intense, like piranha. I call it Cornish piranha. Obviously, you have Devonshire piranhas as well. But yeah, they just, they look like crazy little piranha fish. And when you put the whole lot in the saucepan, it looks quite exotic. So you just saute that and let it break down for a while. And as I said, the scales help to create sort of a thickness to the mixture. And then I just get various sieves and just squish it all through. And you end up with this beautiful, thick, rich soup.
Wow.
It's like a ras bisque almost.
Yeah, it pretty much is, but obviously with coconut base, so it's got that kind of Caribbean style to it. The full recipes on my Instagram, but yeah, there's it's just adapted from that original Hadut recipe, which is a lovely recipe.
Mm-hmm.
Not to plug it already, but what's your Instagram? How can people find that?
It's the Oyster Lady.
Nice and simple.
Yeah. Thank you.
I think for ras, I think one of the most fun things about it before I cook it, because obviously it's a tasty fish, I love its lips. They're just they're so cute. And well, yeah, just me showing my sadness now. I've been sat there for 10 minutes playing with its lips.
Yeah, suspicion of you sort of putting lipstick on it.
Oh, no, I sit there and end up making it talk. Like, why the fuck did you shoot me? It's a Friday afternoon, and I was going to be going to the pub with my missus, and I just put my lip puffer on, and then you shot me in the face, you bastard.
I think it's Anthony. I think it's Anthony that's been drinking tonight, not me, for a change.
I can handle it though. Start talking about my long lost ras lover and how her lips were so beautiful.
Oh.
Anyway, let's move on quickly. Yeah, she's got a bit of an overbite, but a face that only her mother would love.
Spearfishing then, how did you get started, and what sort of made you start, really?
So I basically had known about it on the periphery for years. And as I mentioned before, I didn't think I could do it because of my eustachian tube dysfunction. And ironically, my eardrum is perforated at the moment from Monday night's dive. But that's why I was put off for some time. And I met someone who was on the freediving course here and talked about the sustainability aspect. And something I like to do, which is a little bit naughty, is if I really want to try something, because I'm a journalist, I organised doing a feature on it. I did it with polo on my friend's polo school, horse polo, not like, in the swimming pool. Yeah. And so I organised to write a feature about something that I really enjoy, or I think I'm going to enjoy, and I get to try it out. And I went with Spearfishing UK, and to be fair, it didn't really end up being a course that I went on because my instructor Laith cut his foot. And so the second day was a pure photo shoot. And it was quite funny because I'd never done anything like it before. The first day I freaked out about getting the wetsuit on and almost had a panic attack. Mm-hmm. And get it off me. And was quite surprised that I was being handed a bottle of lube as well, because again, I didn't know anything about the sport. And the second day was just pure photo shoot, and I was asked, it was hilarious. I was asked, can you just dive down and hold on to something and stay there, and I'll come down and I'll take some photos of you. And I'm like, I have to go down and hold on to something and stay there. But I remember, because I thought, God, who does he think I am? I'm not, I've got no idea about this stuff. But I did dive down, and there was a tire actually at the bottom there, and I held on. And I remember I didn't even think about it. I was just down there going, oh, this is lovely, really relaxing. And so before even having thought about shooting fish, I had that moment that a lot of people seem to have, where I found that really peaceful place.
Yeah.
And that was kind of what got me interested. And then I bought all the kit apart from a float and a gun. So I had, that basically isn't a lot, is it? It's the wetsuit and the snorkel mask and the fins. Yeah. And I went out for my first proper dive. Everyone dives there, so I could say the name. You'll guess from my story about it anyway. But I went out at Porth House and I didn't have a gun. I was with my friend that I'd met via one of the spearfishing pages, but who turned out he lived on my street, so that was quite handy. And we headed out, and within probably less than 2 minutes, I saw the most humongous lobster on the bottom of the ocean, right there on the sand. And I remember I was just hovering above it. I'm like, that's what I'm here for. I have to do something now. And so I just dove down and picked picked it up, and I had asked Mark he wore my GoPro for me. I had this old Hero 3, and I came up with this monster, and its big claws like flopped open as it came above the water, like this kind of monster from the deep. And my face was a picture, and so was Mark's actually, because he was in shock. And I'm like, "Did you get that? Did you get that?" He's like, "No, camels are fine." Just that typical thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, can you imagine your first ever dive?
Amazing.
Yeah, that's epic. I took a couple of points away from that, really. So obviously you've got a perforated eardrum, and you've had ear problems in the past. So obviously doing the freediving course, did that, like, do you think you learned enough on the freediving course to be able to not burst your eardrum? I mean,
I haven't done a freediving course. I've only done that 2 days on the spearfishing course, which was
on the
again
spearfishing course. Sorry,
yeah.
But do they not teach you like some freediving elements in that course then, or?
Not a huge amount, and unfortunately, like I said, because it was a press thing, it wasn't like as formal as it could have been, and also Laith did hurt himself, so he couldn't do the second day.
Yeah.
So it was basically like, we need to get the shots, and I had no trouble there. And I have been on some training freediving at the quarry on Bodmin with Freedive UK, and I was doing fine there. I was doing really well. I went from 6 meters the first week to 16 on the second week.
Wow.
And I was surprised. I was like, hang on, I thought I wasn't meant to be able to do this. And I was really enjoying it. And I had like 2 or 3 dives down to that depth. And for some reason, I guess I didn't know this, but cumulatively something wasn't quite right. And it just sort of was like, it blew. And I had tinnitus and sinus infection, and probably had a little bit to do with why I hurt my eardrum the other day. But it's not, it was just my own. I did push myself a little bit. I do have eustachian tube dysfunction, so I shouldn't have pushed myself. But you know what it's like when you're going down and you see the target that you want to get to. It's like,
yeah. I mean, I've actually burst my eardrum before when I first started freediving many years ago. And as you just said, like once you've done it once, apparently it's just a tendency for it to happen again if you push yourself.
yeah.
So if anyone's had a burst eardrum, they need to be super careful not to push themselves in that regards. The other point I was going to make as well, you're saying about sort of trying to find people when you found someone that lives on your street, but as a lady that spearfishes, first of all, what do you refer yourself as? A spearer or spearo, or why is the correct terminology when it comes to that? I don't even know.
I mean, we actually had discussion about this amongst females, that, we're all part of the Women's Spearfishing Facebook page. And there was a discussion about whether we should be spearos or spearer. And I basically, I don't really mind either way. Yeah, it doesn't, spearer, spearo, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm half Portuguese, and in the Portuguese language, it's all about the feminine and masculine. So I'm going to go with spearer, if that's all right. So being a spearer, then I mean, I haven't seen many other spearers. So do you struggle to find dive buddies, or what?
I have dived mostly with men, because there's a lot more of them out there diving. And I joined the Buddies Facebook page, and I'm just quite open to asking people, and it's mostly men there, so that's why that happened. And I have noticed that if a girl is diving and spearfishing, she usually is going with her boyfriend. It's kind of like a shared thing that they do together, and that happened quite a lot with some of the girls here locally. The first girl I ever dived with had to come all the way from California.
Oh wow,
nice!
And that was over a year into my since my first experience. Really cool girl called Joy. She's Spiro Joy on Instagram. She's incredible. We had 4 absolutely mental days of diving and hooning around in my truck and being mischievous.
Nice.
Dives, boat dives.
Nice. I mean, I asked the question because I don't know if you know a lady called Valentina Thomas.
Yeah, I do, yeah.
Yeah, I listened to her podcast with Joe Rogan, and she was talking about the fact that she found it difficult to find dive buddies because men weren't so keen to dive with ladies for some reason. And I don't want to get into the whole, negative aspect of it because that's not what we're about. But I was just interested, really.
2 seconds. Let me interject. What negative aspect about diving with a lady?
There might be assumptions that we can't handle ourselves, but that first day I went out at Porthowstock, I was in for, I think, 4 hours, maybe. And like I said, I didn't have a float, got that lobster. Mark had a float, so he was actually carrying them on his neck, but it was a float, so it was taking the weight. And then we carried on out, and I was really lucky. I got a sea urchin, a spider crab, and a crayfish, all on my first dive without a gun. Wow. And we did head out. We tried to head out. I think, is it the Manacles? Is that what?
Yeah.
But the current was against us. So we'd been swimming at it for ages. And again, it was my first proper dive, and I was like absolutely shattered. And we had to turn back. And I was like, well, you've got a float, so I'm going to just get the shortest kind of route to land because I'm absolutely knackered. And I'm a little bit like, I've got to get back. I've got 6 kg of lead around my waist. And so I left him. I'm like, you go, because he went obviously back to the beach. I ended up getting to the shore, and it took quite a bit of determination. And I was like, hell, this is interesting. And when I got to the shore, it was a rocky beach with a really steep slope covered in brambles. I'm like, okay. So I took my fins off and clambered up. And when I got to the top, I was on the edge of this huge quarry.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, oh, God. And
so
I did actually
this was one of your first dives?
Yeah. So it was like a baptism of fire, but it was.
And you went to the Manacles?
That's pretty brave.
Quite. We didn't make it. We had to turn back.
You even took that, though.
God. Round of applause.
And so then, so I twisted my ankle, and I'm in all this like brand new camouflage wetsuit, and I had to walk all the way around the edge of this quarry, climb over a gate onto the road, and like running down the road in this gear back to the car park. And I was so happy to get back. And that huge lobster, I know a lot of people say when a lobster's that old, you should let it go. And I'm like, no, I've really earned that one.
Absolutely.
I've never understood that because it's had its life. Whereas the little ones, it's like, kill the babies, let the old ones go. It's like, no, that doesn't make sense.
I was just about to say, that actually the bigger ones dominate the area and kill the smaller ones anyway. So supposedly. So in actual fact, you're better off eating the bigger ones and leaving the smaller ones, really.
Yeah, let them have a life.
And I think the main thing with them is that a lot of people don't know how to cook the bigger ones. And they end up saying they don't taste as good or anything. It's because they overcook them.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, absolutely. And that happens across the board with seafood, in my opinion. I always say err on the side of under. That's one of my little catchphrases in my classes. On the side of under.
A huge crab that I just couldn't boil. I mean, it would have taken ages boiling it anyway. So I had to stick it in the oven and make this tent foil to make it all work. And I just stuck a meat thermometer in to get the temperature exactly right. I couldn't tell you what the right temperature is. You'd have to Google it. But having that accurate thermometer does make a real difference as well.
Yeah, I've never really. I'm one of those people. I am a little bit untraditional. Like I used to have a seafood bar, and I'd cook lobster, and everyone would say, "How long do you cook it?" I'm like, "I've got no idea. I just look at it."
For the colour.
I quite like doing it like that because it's about getting your instinct in. It's fun.
Yeah, absolutely. So, out of all of the shellfish, obviously being the Oyster Lady, and Aspera, what's your favourite thing to catch or catch to eat?
Well, I mean, like I said, I'm not as experienced as I'd like to be because I've had to start with sort of injuries and ears. But my favourite thing, I love getting sea urchins. I really do. And I know that's not like a popular thing. It's not dramatic to shoot or anything. But there's something about them. I think it's because it harks back to a memory when I was living in Antigua and I was really skint and I used to actually go and eat them out of necessity on one of the really posh tourist beaches, Pigeon Beach, and go down with this little plastic spoon and the eelgrass and just,
nice.
Essential protein. But I do love sea urchins. And I haven't seen that many around lately.
That's one thing I was going to ask was where would you find the bigger sea urchin? Because one of my favourite things is uni, and I've never seen a sea urchin bigger than a golf ball.
Really?
In this
Well,
water, in these waters.
Yeah, the one that I did get, again, like I said, that first day, was down Porthouse way, but I haven't seen many since. I was a bit spoiled on that first one because I've never even eaten crayfish. I always get those two confused. And yeah, and that was incredible. It's just one of those things that's very rare, isn't it? But I have got, I know, you're asking what's my favourite. When I used to have my seafood bar, one of my favourite things to prepare was cuttlefish. And I can't wait to shoot one of those. They're so good.
Ben, have you tried uni?
No, and I was going to ask, is it the whole thing that you eat? Obviously not the spiky bit. You open it up. What kind of bit do you eat?
It's called the gonad.
I've heard that, but I wouldn't know what I'm looking for. Do you know what I mean?
There's not much else in there, to be fair.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, it's weird. It's like, it's just a hollow shell full of water, which is, keeping it down on the seabed. And it's got this little beak and it just grazes like a little sea cow on the eelgrass and stuff. And what I do is I just get a spoon and I sort of like bash out a circle around its beak and pull, because I like to keep the shell as whole as possible because they're really nice to use for lights and stuff.
Yeah.
And then you just see the strips of yellow, like usually 5 up the inside. There is some kind of stringy stuff, but yeah.
What does it taste like?
A yellow tongue.
Yeah.
Does it have like a flavour profile similar to anything else?
No. I'm not going to say what it tastes like.
It's quite creamy and salty though. It's creamy and salty. But I've had uni a couple of times. I really enjoyed it actually, and I've seen quite a few in the waters here. More so down Cornwall. I've not really seen any in Dorset, maybe a couple in Devon, but more in Cornwall. But yeah, they are really, really good. That crayfish that you had as well, that was a really good sized crayfish.
I know.
But for the UK, that's really impressive. Yeah.
I felt like I should have actually sold both of those things because it would have been really profitable.
And
but you know what it's like. Your first, if you have a first dive like that, it's just like, we were too tired by the time we got back to do anything with them. But my housemate and my lodger and Mark came around the next day, and we just had an absolute feast.
Nice.
Shared it.
That's what it's all about, though, isn't it? I mean, me and Ben were diving in. We won't say the location. We were diving somewhere in Devon, and we that's actually where we met you for the first time. Or we didn't actually formally meet, did we? But you came by us with your first pollock.
I did, yes. Very excited. Well, I think it was just, I won't mention where it is either. I know it's a bit naughty mentioning Cornwall place, but there we go. But it was a beautiful day, and it was the equinox, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it was. And me and Ben were on the hunt for bass. I think I had 2 bass, and I think Ben blanked that day, unfortunately. But I just recall seeing. I don't know who were you with? Were you with Spirit Joy? Is it?
No, she'd gone by then. Back to California. No, it was Amy, who is Those Ocean Eyes. We know people by their Instagram handles these days. And Louise Hunt, who set up the Spearfishing Women's group, and her partner Jo. So we all met up there.
Right.
And it was lovely because I hadn't been in for a while, and it was a perfect day, really beautiful. And I just was very relaxed and really enjoying myself. And I was sort of like a little bit further out than the rest of the group. And I know, kind of the whole buddying up thing, but sometimes I learn better with a little bit of space. And I just really enjoyed the process that day because I was doing it all very calmly and getting down into the kelp and relaxing and waiting. And that's when I got it. And I got a really lovely headshot as well. So it was, when you just do everything right and it works.
Yeah. Well, I think for me, it was just the fact that I knew there were females that spearfished in the UK. Not very many, but then when I kind of saw it,
there were 3 of us.
Yeah. When we saw it happening, like sort of outside the circles that we were familiar with, there was a bit of an eye opener. And I said to Ben at the time, actually, I said, we need to get a spearer on the podcast. And at this time, the podcast was just an idea, wasn't it? And we were sort of banging heads together, really. But I did say to Ben, we need to get one of these ladies on the podcast.
It was you who I spoke to, because I was like, I'm quite chatty. I was like, hey, how did you do? That was you, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, yeah.
I was hiding and embarrassed with my lack of touch.
I'm the more the chubbier one of the two, shall we say?
It's difficult because when you've spent the day in wetsuits and goggles, it's quite hard sometimes to know who you've been talking to.
Yeah. You're tired as well, but yeah, I mean, the whole like spearer and the community around spearers and stuff like fascinates me, and I just think. How in your opinion, how do we grow that? How does the community become bigger, and how does men's perceptions change the idea of like budding up with the ladies?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to say because again, I am quite new to it comparatively, which is one of the reasons I'm stoked that you invited me on. It's really nice to be here. And like I said, I think there are lots of couples who spearfish, so that's cool. But personally, I'd love it if more women got involved and, would be happy to spear with me. I'm quite confident, and my dad was a lifeguard, and, I've spent most of my life around the ocean. So I have that experience, which helps me feel comfortable in the ocean. And I know that not everyone has, so it takes time. But, I mean, that's one of the things I'm hoping to help with in the future. I got asked to do a retreat at my friend's farm in the Lizard, and she's got a beautiful place. It's stunning. It's really close to St. Kevin, and it's got its own well, and it's just beautiful. She does retreats there already, and she asked me to do one there. And it's not just about spearfishing. It's for me lately. Lots of things have been going sort of digital, online, sort of detached from our origins, and I'm sort of trying to push it back the other way because I think it's vitally important to us as a species, socially and ethically, and all of it, culturally, and it's fun as well. And so we're going to be doing what's entitled "Live Like a Mammal" retreats, and it's going to be every aspect of that, like in terms of how we relate to each other, how we fish, how we hunt, how we prepare food. That thing around fires, storytelling, everything.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah.
But girls only?
Pardon?
Girls only, or are we invited?
No, I'm not going to do that because we wouldn't be living like proper mammals if it was.
Yeah.
And I don't like to, I had a chat with Matt who set up the spearfishing, Cornwall group. Yeah. And I was trying to think of ways of getting more women actively involved and maybe setting up some national women's club. But he was like, yeah, let's, you don't want to separate. And I'm like, yeah. And I said, let's maybe look at it as a funnel of bringing them in. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. But I do know that a lot of them probably are a little bit intimidated. And, when you're getting into something with all that kind of kit, it's a huge investment as well if you're getting everything. And they might not know what to get. They might not know if they're capable of loading a gun. I'm not like diminishing women in that sense because I'm like, of course I can load a gun. Apart from when I went to Mexico and had one as big as me, and then I had to, let the guide do it for me, which I was like, God damn. But so what I'm going to do is like have a little taster session during the retreat. Nothing really formal. I'm not a spearfishing instructor, none of that. But just let them come and join us, or let anybody come and join us in just like, like if you imagine like the nursery slopes of a skiing resort. Something like that, where they can have a go in the shallows, have a go at loading a gun, and see if it's for them and if they like it.
Well, I think we've got us three as a first trial, if you want. I'm sure us three would be more than happy to come along and give it a go.
Yeah, that probably goes back a little bit 360 if we're talking about food. The whole like live like a mammal. Is that why you eat every aspect of the animal as well?
Yeah, and it's just like how I feel about being connected to nature. Like I've been working with food for years, and I've had experiences where I'm right here in my kitchen, I've had a brace of pheasant hung up and I did a lovely photo of it, and a friend of mine gave me a load of hassle saying it was cruel. And I'm like, I remember being in your house in Southampton and seeing all your Tesco value chicken and bacon, and it's like that disconnect. And I have had debates with people, because I've said there is vital nutrition that we get from meat. And they're like, I've had vegans say to me, well, you should get injections if you need that, you can get injections. And I'm like, what? That doesn't make sense. It's actually telling you that is vital. I actually feel that if you do hunt for your own food, you actually develop more of respect for it rather than, wasteful.
I couldn't agree more. I've got 2 young kids, and one of the most exciting things for me is bringing home the shellfish or the fish or whatever I've caught and showing them how to prepare that catch. It's just a lovely thing. The same thing, my dad did with me, and the same that probably his dad did with him. It's like passing it down to the generations, and it's that exactly like you say, that connection to nature is so important, to know where your food comes from. I just think in this day and age, more people need that in their life.
I think I'll put it in a more graphic way. Get home yesterday.
Here we go.
So went out yesterday with Sugar Daddy, and went out with him for the day. Got down to North Cornwall at 10 o'clock in the morning. Launched the boat, 4 meter swell. Felt seasick all day. Got home, managed to catch 2 bass yesterday and a mullet. Anyway, my 2 little girls are 4 and 2. And I've got 3 boys as well, but I have a problem with keeping it in my pants. But so saying about teaching the kids, I had the fish in my cool box, and it was a good 6-pound bass, and just teaching the girls where fish come from and what we do with them. Like Ben was saying, the processing them. The first thing I did was got Eve, my 4-year-old, to get the fish out the box and pass me the fish, and then feel the difference between scaled and not scaled. She was then like, can I touch its heart? Can I play with its gills and stuff like that? And they're so fascinated, but we're so removed from that as a society now with the vacuum-packed bullshit meats and stuff. So.
Well, and they actually packaged it to look as little like an animal as possible. It's like my sister used to say, I don't want to eat it if it looks like the animal it came from, and I'm like, I'm the opposite.
I think so. When you were saying about pheasant, though, I think I need to move on to that with the girls is that smell of aged pheasant skin when you pluck it. That's a very specific smell that even I sometimes go, oh, Jesus Christ.
When I shot my first one, I hung it for 2 weeks. I was so excited because I had my cheeks blooded and everything. It was an amazing experience. And my friend was a professional game kind of chef. And I remember phoning him and saying, I think it's all right. It's been hung for 2 weeks. I'm bloody okay. That's a long time. I was like, I really like the gaminess. And he said, well, you can check if it's okay by sniffing its bum. And when you're there thinking, hang on a minute. Is he winding me up? It's like trying to get me to sniff this, gamey pheasant's bottom.
Nice.
But it's part of it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we're actually running a bit low on time now, so I think we've got a few listener questions that we've been given to ask you. I think we'll just take them in turns, lads, if that's all right. So I'll shoot with the first one. The lowdown on foraging for oysters. I think we pretty much covered that, haven't we? I think we'll leave that one, shall we? Dream catch in the UK waters, and how would you prep and cook it?
So that would be the cuttlefish, because I've always bought it from fishermen, and I absolutely adore it. So I would deep fry the tentacles and then dress them with chili flakes and lime zest. And the body would be cut into steaks, scored, seasoned with nduja and barbecued.
Nice. Lovely.
Last question. Should you stab a lobster in the head before boiling it? I vote not, but interested to hear your view. For me, they don't die quick enough, but die very fast when boiled. I think it's due to their brain anatomy. Now, I think we have to say it's actually illegal now to boil them straight away. You have to.
Oh, yeah, it is now illegal, yeah.
So I think you have to kill them or put them in the freezer for 30 minutes, which is basically the same. I don't know what the law states. Do you, Katie?
So this one really bothers me, actually, because, you said about brain anatomy. We don't really have a brain in the traditional sense. And I think that the research has gone a bit awry. So they don't have like they don't have the same, like in terms of us, they can react separately. I suppose it's a bit like when a octopus's leg can come off or a crab's leg can come off. It's separate, and then it can regrow.
Right.
But it's areas of ganglia. So if it, in my mind, if you are stabbing it, good choice of word, stab it in the head, then it's then going to die twice, in my opinion, because if it's got separate ganglia which are reacting, then when you drop it, you've stabbed it in the head, it's still moving, and it will do for a very long time afterwards, going back for years of killing literally thousands of lobster. And I've made sashimi out of them in the past as well. Even if you detach that tail and have the rest of it, you've put the knife through the head and you've taken the tail off and you've made a sashimi and you've left the other bit in the fridge. If you go back half an hour, 45 minutes later, the heart will still be beating. Wow. So I am of the opinion that there's a little bit of, it needs further debate, because I agree, when you drop it in boiling water, 20 seconds and it's gone.
Yeah. If that. What about freezing it first?
Yeah. So I was about to say that, because obviously, no, it's fine. It's not so much freezing it, because obviously you want to maintain the quality of the meat, but if you just get it down into that comatose state, then it doesn't, it's not aware, it's so sensitive to the actual cooking. But
the other thing that you can do is just get Richard round once he's had a drink and he'll just talk it to death. That's what I usually do.
I'm letting you have that one, mate, because I was quite drunk last week. So. Katie, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Maybe we can link up in the future when you've got a bit more experience in spearfishing, and we can.
Yeah, we didn't get to talk about Mexico, did we?
No, unfortunately not. But yeah, let's link up in the future again if you're up for it. But yeah, we really appreciate you coming on. Yeah, thanks for that.
Yeah, it's been great fun. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks, Katie.
It's been lovely to meet you, and I'm definitely waiting for those invites in the post for the mammal experience. That's it.
Yeah, it'll be spring next year.
Fantastic.
That sounds
and
cool.
Just a quick reminder, where can people reach you on your socials?
Instagram is the best. It's just the Oyster Lady. Oyster Lady.
Yeah, and you've got some really awesome content on there, so do look up Katie when you get the chance.
We look forward to speaking to you again soon, and definitely going out for a dive with you.
Yeah, that'd be wonderful. Cheers.
Awesome.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers, Katie. Bye.
Bye.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Well, that was a great episode. Really enjoyed having Katie on.
Yeah, fantastic. She's got a lot of really useful info there, and I'm certainly going to try some of her ideas myself. Saturday, you guys going?
Absolutely.
So it's the X Club Nationals. I don't know what the right title is, down at Shalabra. It's the one competition that I have done before, as is often the case. I didn't catch anything last time. Some interesting ground there, quite a mix of different grounds and some nice places that you can go. You guys got a strategy already?
I did look today. Nothing like leaving until last minute. Hey, I did look today, but it looks like quite big swims, like wherever you go from the bay. I might be wrong because I've actually not really dived it. So it looks like really big swims. So I think it's going to be an interesting one for sure. I haven't really got a strategy. I think probably just flop around and hope something pokes its head up. And that's
Good
me.
Stuff. You, Anthony?
Yeah. I've dived it before, so I've unlike last time, I've already made a plan in my head, and I'm going to stick to it this time and not let anybody else change my mind. So, but no, it's some of the parts of it are considerably deeper than the meat for comp. So we'll have to see where the experienced boys go. But I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully, I can actually add some numbers for the team.
Good stuff. Yeah, looking forward to that. We obviously this will go out when people have already done the competition. Should we do some predictions? Who's going to win this round?
Well, out of us three.
Yeah, what do you reckon?
I'm saying Ben.
Put your money on. Me for the win, Ben. Really?
Yeah, I'm saying you for the win, mate. Yeah, it's the quiet ones you got to watch out for.
I reckon Anthony might have this one in the bag. He obviously didn't do so well the last time round, but he does know this ground quite well.
I'm going to put my vote with Ben as well. Just because it would be rude if I voted for myself.
Well, that's kind of why I went for Ben.
No pressure then.
My big takeaway from the last one, just like really quickly, was that it surprised me how we were like going out where everyone else was, and there was like hardly any fish because it just got scared away. And then you went into shallows and they were there. So it's not always about like steaming out with the more experienced guys and all that. Like, I think there's a lot to be said for doing your own thing. So
yeah, I agree. Find some space. I think that is a really, really good tip. Last time I went, I'd never shot a fish by that point. But where I was, I did see a few fish, and a lot of people were saying that they didn't see any fish at all. So I was kind of by myself most of the time, staying in the shallows as a newbie. But there's definitely something in that. So I think that might be one of my strategies on Saturday. But let's not take it too seriously, eh?
I'm just hoping the wind's going to hold out, because this is obviously for Shalabra. This is already its delayed date. Yeah. And I'm pretty sure in the rules and regulations you can't set a third date for a comp in the BSA. So hopefully it goes ahead and it stays a little bit calmer for Saturday, and the viz is there. Shalabra is one of the things that it can do is it can milk up with the wrong wind. So yeah, fingers crossed. But good luck to both of you.
Yeah, good luck
and
to you, mate.
And you guys, who we got on next week then, do we know?
So we're not quite sure yet, are we? But we're talking to a couple of people at the moment just to see who we can get booked in. We know it's going to be a good episode, whoever we do get on. So yeah, definitely listening to the next one. It is going to be a good one. Just can't tell you who it's going to be yet.
These episodes are getting better and better. They're the feedback we've had from everyone's been like amazing, man, and so much support from the community. It's unreal. So yeah, if anyone wants to shoot us a message on Instagram or Facebook, yeah, we love reading it. So get them over.
That is one of the things I did want to say was thank you so much for the feedback. We really enjoy doing this. Each week afterwards, we spend a good hour after the episode talking about everything that we spoke about during that episode and then the editing and stuff. But we love to hear the feedback from you, and that's the reason that we're doing it. Is it's just three blokes bumbling around trying to figure out what the fuck spearfishing's all about. Thank you so much for the support for everybody.
And boys, do you know how many countries we got listening to us as well? That's
tell us.
That's the other thing I was going to say. It's actually incredible. Obviously, England, Jersey, Guernsey, United States, Australia, Ireland, Netherlands. I mean, it's literally all over the world, all the way in Cyprus, Mauritius.
Wow.
I'd dive in Mauritius. If anyone's listening in Mauritius, I've been to Mauritius twice in my life, and I am more than happy to pay that very expensive plane ticket to come out if you can take me diving.
Well, yeah, so it's incredible that we've had people like literally all around the world listening to us, especially just us three idiots talking shit, as you say. So yeah, really, really humbling, man. Loving it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks ever so much, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Catch you next week.
See you later.